Reading today. Um, First, I want to start with a land acknowledgement. I acknowledge the land I'm speaking from is in the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewas, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, the Inuit, the Métis. Also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I also want to inform all that the RCMP is currently moving in and arresting our First Nations people in the Wet'suwet'en territory. They've currently arrested about 15 people today, and I urge you all to learn more about that and to follow the news surrounding that. I'll take you quickly through an overview of the talk today. We're planning to organize the hour in a way that I'm sure has become very familiar, maybe over familiar to everyone now doing webinars. I'll be introducing the three panelists and then presenting questions by way of getting a discussion in motion. Please feel free to use the question and answer feature to generate your own questions, which will either will present in real time or save at the final, at the end for more open kind of discussion. Just before we begin, I wanted to send a thank you to the Palestinian Support Network, PSN, in Edmonton, an Edmonton-based grassroots nonprofit collective who sponsored the film screening linked to this seminar and who made it possible to offer it as an option for free. So everyone who's on now is able to watch Soufra, the film, for free. And second, thank you to Just Peace Advocates, an independent human rights organization promoting just peace through the rule of law and respect for human rights. And they very generously have given over their Zoom platform and is helping us with our webinar today. Let me first introduce our panelists. So first we have Robert Allison, has been involved in community organizing from a very early age. In 2006, after the brutal Israeli attack on Lebanon, he found himself becoming involved in the Palestinian Solidarity Movement. He is one of the co-founders of the Toronto Palestine Film Festival and one of the co-founders of Hamilton Voice of Palestinian Film Series and the founding executive director of Jewish Liberation Theology Institute. Robert is experiencing fatherhood late in life, so his participation on the panel is doubly appreciated. Next, we have Dania Majid, is a Toronto-based lawyer and long-term programmer of the Toronto Palestine Film Festival, the TPFF, which celebrated its 14th edition this September. It exhibits an exciting array of Palestinian film, music, art, discussions, cuisine. Audiences can enjoy its programming in theater and online, where many programs are still available at tpff.ca. TPFF is a volunteer-run festival, and sales from its extensive merchandise line are available online to support the festival. TPFF looks forward to welcoming you this festival this coming festival next year, and as well as upcoming year-round programming. I'm at all their events, so you'll probably see me there. You're invited to join TPFF's newsletter and find out more about its coming events, co-presentations, resources, and updates. Next, we have Thomas Morgan, is a film director whose film have been leveraged to create lasting movements with a specific call to action. His first film, Storied Streets, captured the painful reality and personal triumphs of those living unhoused in the USA. Waiting for Mamu told the story of Pashpa Basnet, who at age of 21 began helping free innocent children from the prison floor in Nepal. This award-winning film was used to raise funds for the Butterfly Home in Kathmandu to support these children's ongoing education. Soufra, released in 2017, was a New York Times and LA Times critiques pick and has won several film festival awards worldwide. It tells of a generational refugee, Miriam Shar, and her quest for the fundamental right to own a business, a food truck. Soufra has been used to raise funds to build a school at the Burj al Barajneh refugee camp in Lebanon. And finally, we have myself, again, Henry Zakak. I've joined the board of directors following my experience as a CEPAL volunteer teacher in 2011, and mainly focused on 2 refugee camps in central Lebanon, Burj al Barajneh and Shatila. And my commitments since then have gone to a variety of charities and nonprofit organizations in the greater Toronto area. I'll just run a little bit through what CEPAL is and what we've been doing since we've started, and then we'll run into the questions. So CEPAL, we were founded in 1996, and CEPAL stands for the Canadian Palestinian Educational Exchange. We're a 100% volunteer-run organization that assists Palestinian refugees in Lebanon by helping to increase their access to education and bringing public awareness in Canada about their struggle. We do this by supporting local NGOs where they need us most. In 2012, due to the changing security situation on the ground, CEPAL was not able to hold an overseas program. The situation on the ground didn't improve for a number of years, and unfortunately, around that time, we've a number of board of directors have stepped away, and it meant that CEPAL had to rebuild itself, from the ground up. And we've done that. So recently, we've decided to run an in-depth needs assessment with our partner organizations and other organizations that work in the camps to understand, how we can best continue to provide support. Due to the ongoing COVID situation, we currently ran a virtual trial program with one of our partners, and we continue to work with other partners on possible projects for next year. We hope to have a volunteer team in Lebanon for the summer of 2022, and we'll continue to support our partners using distance or blended education. So we're always looking for volunteers interested in helping out. So I think I've talked a lot, and I'll get right into the questions and start the ball rolling. So question number 1 this is for Robert. From an activist perspective, why film? And I mean specifically, how did you come to choose film as a way of getting the Palestinian narrative out there?
Well, because it started back in 2006 when the Israelis bombed Lebanon. I wanted to find some way of expressing my anger over the whole thing. And I ran into a bunch of activists at a protest that were Palestinian activists, joined their group. And after going to a few meetings at the same time in Toronto, my name was Rachel Corey, was going to be put on a production. And I come from a theater background, and the donors at the theater managed to have the production shut down. So then I thought, well, we should show a film because there was a film by the same name. The idea was to launch it off the side of the theater building, but it turned out on the anniversary of Rachel's death, because this is all around the same time, the theater was dark. So a friend or someone I had met had started a small theater in Toronto, and I asked him if we could show the film there. It sat 100 people. He said, sure. And so I convinced the activist, who normally I was like, this was a late association in life, that we should go and do this. We did it. We had a small group of people show up. And then through that summer, we started to build a film series. And the difference was that people probably like myself, my parents, who would not go out to demonstrations in general, they would certainly go sit in a theater and sit and watch film. So that film, summer of film screenings grew we were selling out the house every time we would show a film, because the other problem was you couldn't see Palestinian films in Toronto. And that ended up morphing into the Toronto Palestine film series. And then I tried to do the same thing in Hamilton, similar approach, to get people outside of the traditional activist community to come out, watch film, have discussions, learn about Palestine. The other beauty about the whole thing is if you choose the films correctly, it's Palestinians telling their own story, not other people. So that's about it.
Great. Next question to Dania. What are some of the key questions you've come to ask yourself when you think about whether a film is, Palestinian enough for screening? Is it enough for the principals to be Palestinian, and that the film passes some sort of bar in terms of production values?
Yeah, I mean, we program at TPFF as a committee. So there's a group of us who go through the selection process, and we've done it since day one. It started off actually in Bob's living room until, and eventually morphed, into a formal committee with like amongst us who have, different views and lenses. We don't really ask ourselves questions about, is it Palestinian enough? Because many filmmakers themselves, it's really up to the filmmaker themselves of how they define their film, and if they themselves see it as a film, like about Palestine, or is it a Palestinian film? You'll hear a whole range of perspectives from the filmmakers themselves. So we really look at each piece on its own, for its own merits. Does it, and then there's certain things that, as I said, it's intuitive in terms of the selection process, in terms of what makes it into, the final selection. So it can be, the filmmaker themselves, the perspective that's being told, how it's being told, definitely the quality, is it authentic? Is it exploitive? Does the the people portrayed in the film, do they have agency? Is there dignity in the telling of the story, especially when we're dealing with documentaries? Is it a topic we have not heard about, or a story we haven't heard about, or is it a story that our audiences are looking for? And then we also recognize that our audience is very diverse, so we try to make sure we select films that meet the sort of all aspects of our audience, all demographics of our audience. Some want an artistic film, some want a more education film. So there's a whole slew. And then again, what's happening currently right now, like in terms of present affairs or common current events. So we try to make sure that the film and the audience, the film speaks to the audience, and the audience connects with the film. So that's really what we're looking for.
Great. So to Thomas, what was it about the particular situation of the women you brought to the screen in Soufra that made you think they were the right or even the best subject for a feature-length documentary?
So I don't necessarily know that the best stories always make it to the screen. I think sometimes it's the best storytellers. And it was something about Miriam and her commitment to her community, the commitment to her cause and these women, and this idea that she could maybe lift a whole community by this one act of, pushing back against the government for these very basic rights. And she was so committed, and also because you can see all of her emotion on her face, that lends itself really well to cinema. But I didn't, there was so much that was unexpected, I think, for me as an American going there. And I was really very fortunate to have an amazing crew, all Lebanese, who were on our team. But I think my objective with the film was, how do I bring light to this issue, especially in the midst of this refugee crisis around the world, and which has been going on for far longer than when we started calling it the refugee crisis. But how do I bring light to this, and then how do I change the narrative around the way that Americans in particular talk about Muslims, that talk about the Arab countries, that talk about the Middle East. And that was my hope with the film. But really, it was just chasing Miriam, her dream. And it's a dream that I think so many people don't even consider, like, as with the rights that you have. And it was just like, how do we make this into something that she's proud of, that brings her exactly what you said is the dignity and the agency to tell her story without us being involved. I don't ever want to interpret somebody else's story and tell the rest of the world what she's saying. And in a way that brings, I think, a sense of like wanting to be involved. I had so many people after the film in the US that would say, why couldn't you bring Miriam here for the Q&A? Mm-hmm. And I was just floored by the fact that you don't understand. These refugees are not allowed to enter our country. And it was for the first time that this affected them. It was for the first time that they couldn't have what they wanted. And they were like, oh, well, when I think of refugees, I don't think of her, right? I mean, it was like they have this idea of who they are. And I thought that was really super interesting. I think the other thing that I found that was really interesting, this was very early on, was the number of Jewish people who would approach me and say, I feel so ashamed because of what I've been told and what I've believed up until now. And the film is not political. We kind of went out of our way to not be political because that's not who she is. But I thought it was really interesting to start to get some of that dialogue with people who had forever seen an issue in only one direction.
Yeah. And the film brings a ton of memories of me walking through those very streets, and the very alleys, and seeing every single power line or internet line or water line, and them catching on fire. So I fortunately I was able to live in the camp and experience all those, and see the same people and live with them. And I think a lot of people here don't understand. Not just, well, I guess even Lebanese people don't understand, right? People who are across the street from the camp don't even understand because they don't go in the camps. And I have cousins that have never gone into the camps, and people who are afraid to go in the camps, and vice versa. People in the camps are afraid to go outside the camp.
Well, I was amazed actually at that very subject. I was amazed when I would tell people that I was there and I was going into the camp to make this film, that how many people would be like, "Oh my God, do not go into that camp. You can't go into that camp." I'm like, I've been in there for a year. What are you talking about? But it's got this, again, it's got this like the people have this fear of what's inside those, those places. So
it's and the when I was watching the film. It was interesting to see the reaction of the Palestinians who went outside of the camp and had to do things outside of the camp, and it was another world for them as well, right?
Yeah.
And I experienced that because I lived in both sides. I saw, the experience of living inside of it and coming out, and being out coming in as well.
I was taken back by the fact that so many of the women who work with Miriam had never been to downtown Beirut. I mean, it's like 10 minutes in a car, and they had never left that camp to go that far because their fear of leaving the camp was just the same as fear of people coming into the camp. And so and then at the, as we kind of progressed, to see them welcome into these homes, to cater at these homes of places that they would have never seen before, and being accepted by people who forever had never, would never even recognize them and their place in that community and that culture was pretty amazing.
Yeah. The next question, it's for anyone or for all, I guess. So for anyone who wants to make justice their focus, their own discussion on Palestine, an early and frequent showstopper is this counter argument of complexity. I just got an email literally like 2 days ago from my MP, and in his email it was like, this situation's too complex, and I had to respond to this, right? So you see it every day, and it's everywhere, right? So as in, this issue you're touching is just too complex, the hostilities too prolonged, the sides too intractable to ever come to any resolution, even in one's own thought or positioning. So in your own experience, what are some of the strategies which filmmakers have used to counter this argument from complexity? And given the added complexity which really does come from when films attempt to portray the historical layering in the experience of Palestinians in Lebanon, are there even strategies specific to Lebanese Palestinians filmmakers which you have noticed? So I guess it's multiple questions, but I'll open up to anyone on the panel, around this complexity argument, and how do we go around this, or how do filmmakers go around this?
I actually don't think it's that complex of an issue. I think that complexity is a political term that we use to make it something we don't have to do anything about. There's no complexity about what the UN had said back in 1947. There's no complexity about how people are supposed to be able to live. That's not a complex issue. It's pretty easy to understand. I think the complexity is why we, the United States as a nation, continue to support a bully in the Middle East, and why do we give this agency to a country that that basically has taken they are in fact the tail wagging the dog here, and I think honestly we've done a tremendous injustice to the Israelis as well. If they had to work out these issues in their own region, I think that would have very much different outcomes, and I think they would be more positive outcomes that would lend itself to peace. But when you don't have to work those things out, when you're always going to win the fight, when you're always going to get the support, then I think it adds this is the complexity. The complexity is, why would you ever listen to anyone? Why would you ever be involved in any kind of conversation that's meaningful in the region? And I think that we have, through our media and through our conversations and kind of listening to only the Israeli side for so many years, we have created this, and we don't know how to get necessarily out of it. And I think that in fact is the complexity: is how do we step back from this in a way that we give this opportunity for people to politically and reasonably and peacefully work out issues that shouldn't be that complex to work out.
I'll pass it over to Daniel or Robert.
Yeah, I mean, I think whenever we hear the word complex, especially associated with the situation with Palestinians, it's code. It's code for don't talk about it. It is code, and it's also code for we're not going to do anything about it. And we see it not just in film, but we see it in academia, in politics. The Canadian government is just as bad as the American government, just with maybe a few less zeros at the end of that check, but we are still very much complicit in the occupation, or the prolonging the occupation. So really, what we've noticed increasingly is that no one doing this work, whether they be filmmakers or students or other activists, academics, no one is paying heed to the argument of complexity. And if you're going to do this work on Palestine, then you really just need to slough it off and tell the story you want to tell and do the work that you want to do. So, in terms of filmmaking, filmmakers are not being bogged down by complexity. They are not limiting themselves or feel the need they have to explain the entire situation A to Z to be able to tell their story. They're just telling their story. And they can be it could be a short story, it could be a full feature-length film, but there's no need to have to break down, the entire sort of history that led to the point of the start of the story that they want to tell. Just filmmakers are just telling the story from the point they want to start at. And there's many, with respect to Palestinian films based in Lebanon, are based on refugees in Lebanon. There's quite a few filmmakers who are very well respected who've been telling these stories, whether it be feature films. So many of them are inspired by true stories, and many of them are documentaries. And both genres, are very much effective. You have Mehdi Fleifel, who, has used his own personal life story and gone back to the same refugee camp he grew up in Ain al-Halwa, and started off with his own, home videos, told his story. Those stories featured his friends, and then he went off and made stories about told his friends' stories through his films. And he kept going back. He has gone back to the camp several times and, followed the lives of the same person in 3 or 4 different short films. Then you have someone like May Masri, who has had, an exceptionally powerful documentary films featuring children, and she uses children to tell the story that they want to tell. Not bogged down by maps and statistics, but just the children's perspectives of growing up Palestinian in Lebanon. And more recently, we've seen quite a few short films coming out of the camps as well, by both Palestinians in the diaspora or Palestinians from Lebanon. And another, common, sort of genre or artistic expression that we've seen them employ is humor. And even though some of the stories are quite bleak and they're sort of dealing with maybe bleak circumstances within the camps, but they are told from a humorous perspective, which I think is important to know, because many outsiders do not believe Palestinians know how to laugh, can experience joy or have any joy in their life. So using that tool of humor is also one effective way to tell the Palestinian refugee stories in a way that's unexpected.
Okay, we'll pass out to Robert.
I don't have much to add.
Okay, so I have a next question.
I will say too, I think one other point to your point about the movie is you have to get an audience, and the audience can't be the same audience that's as every movie, because they support the cause. So right, like the audience for Soufra were people who maybe didn't know anything about it, but you still have to entertain in a way to be able to even start the conversation to get your point across. And I think that was the part that we kind of kept coming back to, is this film has to appeal to people who don't know maybe anything about this cause, don't want this to be political, when they, because if you said it's political on the front end, so many people would have turned away and not come, because they thought, I'm not astute enough in this issue to be part of a conversation. But once they see it and they start asking those questions and they start researching some of that, then suddenly they understand more of what's going on. And I think that is a bit of a hook for people in general. It's a way to draw people in. So when there's humor or when there's something else that draws them to the film, and it just happens to be by a Palestinian, or it happens to be about Palestine, and then suddenly they learn something, now they have an interest in knowing more, because they care about the people who were in the film, or they love the film and want to just know more about why it is the way it is. So I think that was always in the back of our minds, is how do we draw an audience that isn't just in tune with this issue for Palestinians?
So our next question, it's interesting one. So it's okay. It says, do you think there'll ever be a Palestinian Exodus style of film? And I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with Exodus, but it's an older film, probably maybe from the 50s or so, Hollywood style film with A-list actors presenting a narrative that's very sympathetic to well, I guess it was to the creation of the state of Israel. So do you think that there'll ever be a Palestinian style of Exodus film that will be sympathetic to, with an original story of contemporary Palestinian state, for example? In what form might it take? Would this even be a good thing? Or should we be beyond it at this point? Maybe I'll pass it off to Robert. Robert, you're on mute.
I would hope not. I basically find that the stories that are being told now through most of the films that I've been watching, good in terms of the stories of the Palestinian people. I don't need a big, I don't think a piece of fiction the size of the kind of legend of that Exodus has become is necessary or probably helpful. You know, I don't think it's yeah, I don't think it's necessary. I would certainly hope it didn't happen. I think there are real stories that are being told now.
I will say though that it is nice to see for the first time that there are celebrities that are known, that are standing up and saying, you know, I mean, not for the first time, but for the first time that it's been so public, that are standing up and saying this situation is wrong. You know, when you get George Clooney and his wife, and you get, you know, Susan Sarandon, and you get another number of other people who are kind of rallying around this. Like, that was a bit unheard of, especially in Hollywood, for years and years and years. So not necessarily that we need a film, but we do need more activists. We do need more people and advocates for the cause. And maybe that helps get these real stories that Robert just talked about a bit more attention in the general public.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of launch off that question. I mean, one thing, you know, one of the biggest struggles for getting Palestinian films made is funding. So filmmakers such as, you know, Hani Abbasad and Marie Jasser, you know, sort of two of the biggest names in Palestinian cinema, you know, despite their international success, I mean, one thing you will hear about is about the struggle to get funding for the films. You know, Anne Marie at the last TPFF she attended, you know, when we looked at her film Wajib, she had about, I don't know, like maybe 6 or 7 countries of production listed to that title, and including Colombia, which was, you know, really unexpected. And so that was a question, you know, we posed to her, and she mentioned, you know, as she's kind of going around the world, kind of scraping this funding together, she found a grant, you know, from Colombia, that if she could find you know, if she could employ someone of Colombian descent in her filmmaker, she could have access to this fund. So she scoured, you know, the neighborhoods of Nazareth and was able to find a Palestinian woman that had a Colombian citizenship, and gave her a speaking role in the film so she could access those funds. Which goes to show the great lengths that Palestinian filmmakers have to go to get these productions made. So on the one hand, I would not be opposed if someone would wanted to hand Anne Marie Jasser $10 million to make a film. But I think really what it comes down to, she or her, you know, the other Palestinian filmmakers, you know, it would be for them to decide what they do, that, you know, what kind of story they decide to tell ultimately. And, you know, does it necessarily have to be an Exodus type, you know, retelling of Palestinian history, or, you know, is it another type of story that they want to tell with that funding? So I really think ultimately, you know, it's Palestinian filmmakers will decide the type of film that will ultimately get made.
I think that also kind of brings up the interesting issue of authorship, right? I think I've been posed this question so many times, like, why is an American going to Lebanon and telling a story about, you know, the Palestinians? And my answer is always, it wasn't like there was a line of people to tell Miriam's story. I was really the only one who showed up. So I do think it's really important that authorship be very authentic to the Palestinian people, and not be the authorship of, you know, someone trying to fictionalize this issue in a way that isn't representative. And so I think anything that comes out, or that is part or parcel to a fictional piece, really needs to be a Palestinian filmmaker and and writer that really know this issue in a way that, you know, you're not going to ever find someone who writes a fictional piece that's outside of that. I think that authorship is ridiculously important in this case.
In a recent decision by Netflix was to offer a package of 30 variously themed films from or about Palestine. Is this mostly a good thing, a mixed blessing, or could it ultimately be some sort of weird type of whitewashing of, you know, actualities on the ground? And I guess in a very importantly, is it a good or bad thing for festivals like TPFF, at which I should mention that I think most of the films have already been played at TPFF. So maybe we'll start with Dania on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten this question quite a bit after the release of the Netflix films, or the films on Netflix. I mean, I think, really based on the excitement of people on social media for this to happen, I think overall it's a good thing that, the most people who, as many people to access these stories, and, you know, you know, the more people who can see the stories, the better. And again, Palestinian filmmakers in particular have been very much marginalized for a very long time, and our narratives do not appear anywhere except for the longest time just at Palestine film festivals across the globe. And again, there's quite a few of us now around the world, but not every city has access to a PFF of their own. So it is great that, these films can be used, they can be accessed, they can be used for educational purposes, even after you've seen them at a PFF. So, I really do encourage I'm really happy by that access, and especially if it means, the artists are going to get paid for that work. I think just, with the pandemic and moving remotely, Palestine film festivals, including TPFF, have had to pivot. We've had to, experiment, change, evolve. And I think that's our role as a film festival. We have to keep up with the times and change and adapt and evolve. So, I think that's our job to figure out. But one thing I will say is it is a completely different experience to watch a film at a film festival, a Palestinian film festival, than watching it at home alone on your laptop or your TV on Netflix. We screen usually when we screen our films, we're usually doing it, even though we do it as a committee, we're usually doing it on our laptops by ourselves at home. And every time I watch a film we have selected, see it in theater with an audience, it's like I'm watching it for the very first time. And I tend to love it even more, seeing it in the way it's meant to be seen. And the other thing, when you're watching it with an audience, especially at a Palestinian film festival, our festival, or watching it in that space, it's a safe space to be able to react. So again, it's also a very different experience than watching it at TIFF. And, if I can share another, same story with Anne-Marie's film, Wajib. I remember the first time I saw it was at TIFF. And, I thought it was a good film, we requested a screener. I watched it again at home. I thought it was, good film. We all liked it. And we started programming it on our website, and Anne-Marie writes back to me and she says, "I don't like the picture you selected. Can you please use this one? It's more upbeat. This film is a comedy." And I was like, sure. But I was thinking, a comedy? How is this film a comedy? It's so, I'm like, what's so funny about this film? And, it was our closing night film. The theater was jammed to the gills. We had about another 100 people in the rush line trying to get in. And the film starts, and the audience is just laughing hysterically throughout the entire film. And I realized then and there, I was like, it is a comedy. I didn't see it, but at TIFF, everyone thinks a Palestinian film is so serious, so everyone's just watching it for in its seriousness. And when you're watching it at home alone, you're kind of going through the motions. But to be able to watch it, and people told us after the fact that because it was at TPFF, they felt they could laugh at like, it was safe space to laugh at ourselves because some of the jokes were self-effacing and making fun of our own culture. So the community, people in the audience felt, well, it's okay, it's safe space to laugh out loud in this audience, amongst this audience. And it really it shaped the film very differently. It was a different experience. And, whether our films are funny or not funny, I think it's really important to, to have that community gathering, because you have those amazing spontaneous discussions that happen right outside the theater doors as soon as the theater, the film lets out, and people are exchanging ideas, debating ideas, sharing emotions, even if it, no matter what kind of film it is. So I'm hoping that we, throughout the pandemic, we will not forget what that in-person, in theater festival experience is like when you do experience Palestinian art in a community type setting.
Yeah, there's one TPFF film I'll never forget, and it's a short film, and I think it was from 2012 or 2013 or something, and it was Sons of Ilabun, and I just remember not like just I remember the film, like every aspect of it, but I remember the whole audience, and maybe there might have been like 50 people in there or so, but it was just so like you remember every second of that experience, right? Just being in that theater, and yeah, just goosebumps, that whole experience, right? I'll never forget that.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to talk about well, speaking of kind of, I guess, going off that, I want to talk about discomfort. And there's a certain amount of discomfort or dissatisfaction when we see a film and the screen turns black from a Palestinian film, right, or Palestinian-based film. And discomfort comes from a variety of factors, such as unfair situations of living conditions or unjust legal systems. There's tons and tons of reasons why we can have this discomfort or dissatisfaction. Is this sometimes a goal of the film to leave viewers feeling this level of discomfort or dissatisfaction after watching a Palestinian film? Is the hope then that those feelings will be, help to cause change in either in someone or to drive change? So I'll open that up to everyone.
I mean, I think it's not necessarily discomfort, it's reality, right? You're not trying to make somebody, I never intended to make somebody feel sorry for Miriam or for the people inside the camp. I just wanted to show their reality. And I think that, this reality, there's a lot of, I mean, you can go to the prison floors in Nepal and you can find another reality that's uncomfortable, but it's their reality. It's the way that it is. And so I think those things, like, I think those discomforts are like, you have to expose those and you have to talk about those. And because that's become normalized for them. So why wouldn't you show those in a way that's normal, like in a way that is just the reality of who they are and where they are and how they got there and what they're trying to accomplish. So I don't necessarily know that you do it to make somebody necessarily uncomfortable, but I definitely think that you show that in a way to help them understand what that situation is. And then with our films in particular, like, and these aren't like game changers. We're not doing something that's going to resolve this issue, but we like to give people very specifically, when they say after the film's over, like when they ask the question, how can I help? Like, hey, we're trying to build a school inside a refugee camp. They told us this would never be done, but we think collectively we can do it, right? And so I think it's like focusing that to that cause of like, how do we make this better? And that was determined by Miriam and the women there, not us. Like, we just asked them, what can we do for you? How do we leave it better than we found it? So even that small thing, like, it wasn't necessarily small, but 150 kids go to school now that otherwise wouldn't have been able to go to school inside that camp. I think it gives them a sense of like, how do I stay engaged to make this better? Not just right now when this film strikes me, but I just want to stay engaged with Miriam or with that community to know what I can do from this point forward. And people do. They 3, 4, 5 years later, they're still, keep staying in touch with Miriam, or they're still, asking, what do you need at the camp? How do we help you? And I think that dialogue is really helpful because they understand something now, that they can be part of a change, or even economically be part of a solution.
And Robert, Daniel, do you have anything to add? I think Robert, you're on mute.
No, I'm not. I'm
Oh,
thinking.
okay.
I'm
You're
thinking.
thinking?
I think I've never been adverse to people ending up feeling uncomfortable from what they've been seeing, and I think, to go to Thomas's point, that it is the reality often what we're watching, and if that makes you uncomfortable, then so be it. And I think that often what my experience has been is that some people that get truly uncomfortable are actually end up springing into action, or participating, or they talk about what they've seen, and so the Palestinian narrative becomes more widespread. So I think it's good. If you want to be uncomfortable, so be it. It's fine by me.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I think, we don't set out to program films to make people as uncomfortable as possible. I mean, we don't set out with that as an objective, but, we definitely embrace the power of discomfort. And and I think, any sort of, uh, learning experience, education, I mean, it comes with discomfort. I mean, that's how change comes. Change doesn't come when you're comfortable. So it is an emotion, that we do embrace. And if that's something that a film triggers, then yeah, like, depending on the storyline, you should be uncomfortable. You should not be okay with the way the situation is. And for us, we don't also want people to leave completely, like, feeling, helpless either. So, this is why what we try to do is we match our films with community partners, a partner that might be doing work on the particular topic of the film. So we can sort of connect the subject matter and, some type of activist work or organizing work that is happening on the ground by one of our community partners. So people can, won't leave uncomfortable and helpless or hopeless, because that's the part we don't want. We want people to feel uncomfortable and then wanting to be doing something about it. And even if it's just, we've had people say, they saw a film and brought somebody back with them. Well, that's an action that, that was something, you know, enlightening for them, or a change moment for them, and they wanted to bring other people, to the festival so they can share those moments. That's still something. But I think, as a community organization, being able to connect, our work with the work that's being done on the ground by other community organization is an important piece of the work that we do.
I think I remember when we first started the summer screenings, we were mostly focusing on documentaries, and people did get really uncomfortable. And something we recognized was it was not fair, and maybe not our goal, for them to leave the theater with their heads full of all of this uncomfortableness without having an outlet and being able to talk about it. So we often tried to make sure we could end the film with a discussion, and that often helped. And then that would lead into what Danya's saying, where you can propose actions they can take and stuff like that. So we do that in Hamilton now. We never show a film and say good night. We make sure we can start up some kind of conversation to give people some kind of outlet for that uncomfortableness.
So we're getting close to the end of time, so I'm going to open it up to the question and answers that were written in the chat. Let me see here. Okay, so this relates to specifically about Miriam. One person's asking, how did Miriam? Let me see. Oh, how did she do her fundraising? Well, I know that we saw the Kickstarter campaign. So I think she had donations from 7 countries. How did she advertise? Second question is, if someone can give us an update about Miriam, how she and other women are doing now. How is Soufra doing as a business project? I think Thomas, you're on mute.
Yeah. So yeah, so what was interesting is she knew that there was something that was, crowdfunding, that she didn't know what it was. There was an organization there that was helping her with some other things called Alphanar that talked about this crowdfunding. And so she wanted to put it up. And in the film, you see that she's woefully behind for most of the crowdfunding. And I thought, this is going to be the shortest film ever if she doesn't get this funding. Like, I don't know how we end it. But what happened was it got noticed by somebody at Kickstarter. And that's what made it take off. Like, suddenly they pulled it to the front page. They said, wow, this is really worthy and amazing. And it went crazy. Really interesting story was I was in Egypt. The film played in Egypt as part of the El Guna Film Festival there, because we premiered there because that's where we could get Miriam to, the only festival we could get Miriam to at the time. And so I'm sitting on a panel and somebody walks by me and they said, are you the filmmaker for Soufra? I said, I am. And this woman said, I am the woman who put in the last $20,000 so that Miriam would hit her goal on the Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. And like, literally, I met the woman who put in the money at the end that made her hit the goal of the Kickstarter, because she was so taken by her story. It was just this, it was really fortunate. But I stay very much in touch with Miriam. I probably WhatsApp with her at least every other week. And there is a scripted feature that's going to be done about her in that camp by a company called iGeneration Studios. And I will direct that, and I will direct it because I will collaborate with Miriam to make sure that story is authentic in her journey and what she wants to be sure that it says as well. So, but all of the women are great. The food truck it's really become more of a delivery truck. Because they're catering so much, and they've opened a small restaurant actually inside the camp called Soufra, which is it's on the corner, so it's outside and inside. It's like where all people can commune, whether they're in the camp or not, and it's been quite successful. I think the issue really now for anybody in Lebanon is the economy is terrible. There's so many issues around just trying for anybody to survive, but they have repeatedly been the ones who, after the explosion in Beirut, they were the ones that were taking food out and handing it out to people on the street who didn't have a place to stay. Like, they are just they're amazing. And so we continue to sell the cookbook, which continues to fund their efforts, and I can never let go of those relationships. So I stay in touch with all of them. It's like waiting for Mamou. I'm going to Nepal right after Thanksgiving here in the States because the woman in the film is getting married. So like, my family continues to increase in size, but I can never look away from the cause, because it's so much more than the movie. The movie is just a way to tell the rest of the world about the things I think are really amazing, I guess. So.
And I completely understand that, because I have, since I was in the camps, I have a mom in the camp who take care of all the volunteers, and we still keep in touch, and and connect often. And like I said, she's like my mom in the camp, right? So we're running out of time, and it's going to pass it to each one of you just to tell a little bit about what you guys have planned next. You have a couple. Let's say we can give it maybe a minute each in terms of what are your next steps, or what are you planning to work on next?
All right, I'll go. So the scripted feature for Soufra, I'm hoping that we start writing that in 2022, and that we start production in 2023. I just finished a film in the States called Scrum, which is a film about the only African-American college rugby coach in the country who used all of his scholarships to bring first-generation college students to a very affluent, very white college in the South, in his journey of starting this program. So it's always kind of in the tonality of the voiceless. So I continue to do those kind of stories, I guess.
Great. Dania, I will pass it to you next.
Yeah, so I don't know, everything seems to be spinning because there's always so much going on. So TPFF, as you mentioned in the bio, we just wrapped up our 14th year in September, but we do year-round programming. So right now what we have going on is Queer Cinema for Palestine, which is happening it goes until November 20th. And it's something we helped in the organizing of it. And we co-hosted one of the events in Paris and Beirut. So if you go to the Queer Cinema for Palestine website, you can access all the programs that have taken place since we started November 11th. So all those programs on demand are still up, and you still have a couple of more days to catch the programming to come. But there's programs from festivals around the world who created special programs, for Queer Cinema for Palestine. And this is my backdrop. That's the poster from that festival. We also have a couple of co-presentations actually in the United States. So the Arab American Film Festival out in San Francisco, we're doing a co-presentation of 200 Meters, which is this year's opening night film. So if you missed that film, you can catch it. There's just another chance to catch it. It's a really amazing, powerful film. And then we start programming. We've already started programming for year 15, our 2022 festival. So we're already busy planning for that. So stay tuned. Join our newsletter at tpff.ca to get to find out all the exciting information to come.
We're probably looking at showing a film, but my wife and I and my son have just gotten back into Hamilton, and so we're just getting resettled. So there's not much planned in the immediate future, but hopefully in the new year we'll start showing some more films online.
Oh,
great.
And Henry, just one thing, because there was just one question from someone about the Grandparents Film Festival.
Yeah.
I can just answer that quickly. If you go to our website, tpff.ca, you can see archives of our past films, and we have a couple of films, I think each year we have maybe a film that features Palestinian elders telling their stories. So for that person looking for suggestions, they can go there. Jaffa, we had a film about Jaffa this year. Last year we had 1948, Chaos and Catastrophe. But they're one of many films that we've screened that featured elders. So just go to our website under the program tab. You can find our archives there.
Perfect. So I want to thank all the panelists for joining, all our partner organizations, and to all the attendees who were part of our first webinar. If you or anyone you know would be interested in volunteering or contributing to CEPAL's plans and activities, feel free to reach us at info@cepal.ca or visit us at www.cepal.ca, and feel free to send emails, message us, or find us on Facebook, and we'll get back to you guys. Again, thanks again for everyone. I know it went by pretty quick. I wasn't expecting it to go by this fast, but it did, and I'm sure we'll do another event in the future, and hopefully we'll get more you guys involved in this. So thanks everyone for joining, and I guess I'll open up if there's anyone has any kind of last minute statements or questions. I think that's it. We're just getting thank yous on the chat. So thanks everyone for joining, and have a good night. Thanks guys.